Why do some fortunes die in a single day, while others grow stronger through the chaos? I remember the winter of 1987. I was sitting in my father's small office in Lower Manhattan, the air thick with the smell of old paper and the bitter cold seeping through the window frames. On the television, the news was screaming. The stock market had collapsed. Wealth that took decades to build was vanishing in a matter of hours. I was young then, panic rising in my throat like a tide, clutching a handful of reports that showed our own losses. I looked at my father. He wasn't looking at the screen. He was calmly pouring a cup of tea, his hands as steady as a mountain. I asked him, "Father, how can you be so still? Everything is breaking." He set the cup down, looked me in the eyes with a gaze that had seen much worse than a market crash, and he said, "My son, the world builds on sand and wonders why the house falls when the storm comes. We do not build on sand, we build on the blueprint." That day I learned that a crisis is not a disaster, it is a filter. It separates those who merely have money from those who possess the wisdom to command it. I have walked through many such storms since then, recessions, bubbles, global shifts, and I have watched men much smarter than me lose their homes, their dignity, and their hope. Yet my family and the community that raised me did more than just survive. We thrived. Stay with me for the next few minutes. Look into my eyes through these words. What I am about to reveal to you is not a financial theory you can find in a textbook, and it isn't a tip from a Wall Street broker. It is the blueprint. It is the spiritual and practical architecture that has kept my people prosperous through centuries of exile and uncertainty. I am going to show you exactly how the Jewish mindset survives when the world is failing, and how you can apply these same ancient protocols to your life today. Stay, because this is what kept my family prosperous for generations while others lost everything.
To understand how we survive, you must first understand how we view the world. You see, most people look at an economic crisis as an external enemy, a monster that comes to take their parnassa, their livelihood. But in my home, the dinner table was a classroom, and my grandfather was our greatest professor. He used to tell us that money is like water. It flows where there is a vessel to hold it, and it escapes where there is a leak in the spirit. In our community, we don't just talk about wealth, we talk about mazal. Most people think mazal means luck, but they are mistaken. In my decades of business, I have seen that mazal is an acronym for makom, zman, and limud. It is about being in the right place at the right time with the right knowledge. And that knowledge is what I call the blueprint. This blueprint is etched into the very fabric of the Torah, but it is lived out in the way we handle a single coin. It is a mindset of stewardship rather than ownership. When I started my first real estate firm, I didn't ask, "How much can I take?" I asked, "How can I build a vessel, a kli, that is strong enough to hold the blessing without breaking?" Throughout my life, I have seen the same patterns repeat. I have seen the mighty fall because their vessels were made of pride, and I have seen the humble rise because they followed the ancient laws of financial physics. Today, I am inviting you into my study. I am sharing with you the stories of the boardrooms I've sat in and the lessons I've whispered to my own children. We are going to decode the survival mechanism of a people who have lost everything material time and time again, only to rebuild it 10 times stronger because we never lost the blueprint. To understand how we remain standing when the ground shakes, you must understand a principle that has been whispered in our homes for 2,000 years. It is a simple rule found in the Talmud, yet I have seen it save more fortunes than any modern insurance policy. It says, a man should always divide his money into 3 parts, a third in land, a third in merchandise, and a third at hand.
In my early 30s, I saw the true power of this law through a man I will call Benjamin. Benjamin was a contemporary of mine, a brilliant mind in the textile industry. He was what the world calls a visionary. During a period of massive economic expansion, Benjamin decided to put every single dollar he had into a new synthetic fabric technology. He was all in. He laughed at my slow approach. He told me, "Old man's wisdom is for old times. Today's speed is the only security." I remember sitting with him in a kosher deli in Brooklyn. He was boasting about his projected returns. I told him, "Benjamin, the Torah teaches us that the world is a wheel. Today you are at the top, but the wheel always turns. Where is your third at hand? Where is your third in land?" He just waved me off. He had no vessel. He only had a big net, hoping to catch a massive wave. Then the crisis of the early 90s hit. Interest rates spiked, and the demand for his specific miracle fabric vanished overnight. Because he was over-leveraged and had no diversification, his speed turned into a free fall. He didn't just lose his business, he lost his family home, his reputation, and his peace of mind. I sat with him again months later. The fire in his eyes was gone. He looked at me and whispered, "I thought I was smarter than the wheel." You see, in the Jewish mindset, we don't try to beat the market. We respect the market's volatility as a fact of life. This is the concept of parnasa, sustenance that is purposeful. My father taught me that true wealth is not about the peak of the mountain, it's about the strength of the foundation. Benjamin built a skyscraper on a needle. My community builds wide, low-impact foundations that can support a palace for 100 years. The blueprint tells us that he who gathers little by little makes it grow. This is not just a moral lesson, it is a survival strategy. During that same crisis, while Benjamin was collapsing, my family firm was actually expanding. Why? Because we had our third at hand. We had liquidity. While others were forced to sell their assets for pennies to survive, we were in a position to buy. We didn't celebrate their loss, but we were ready because we followed the protocol of the 3/3. This is the first lesson I want you to etch into your mind. Never let your ambition outpace your architecture. If you want your wealth to survive a crisis, you must stop looking for the one big win and start building a diversified vessel that can weather any season. Benjamin looked for luck, we looked for the law.
To understand how we remain standing when the ground shakes, you must understand a principle that has been whispered in our homes for 2,000 years. It is a simple rule found in the Talmud, yet I have seen it save more fortunes than any modern insurance policy. It says, a man should always divide his money into 3 parts, a third in land, a third in merchandise, and a third at hand. In my early 30s, I saw the true power of this law through a man I will call Benjamin.
Benjamin was a contemporary of mine, a brilliant mind in the textile industry. He was what the world calls a visionary. During a period of massive economic expansion, Benjamin decided to put every single dollar he had into a new synthetic fabric technology. He was all in. He laughed at my slow approach. He told me, "Old man's wisdom is for old times. Today, speed is the only security." I remember sitting with him in a kosher deli in Brooklyn. He was boasting about his projected returns. I told him, "Benjamin, the Torah teaches us that the world is a wheel. Today you are at the top, but the wheel always turns. Where is your third at hand? Where is your third in land?" He just waved me off. He had no vessel. He only had a big net, hoping to catch a massive wave. Then the crisis of the early 90s hit. Interest rates spiked, and the demand for his specific miracle fabric vanished overnight. Because he was over-leveraged and had no diversification, his speed turned into a free fall. He didn't just lose his business, he lost his family home, his reputation, and his peace of mind. I sat with him again months later. The fire in his eyes was gone. He looked at me and whispered, "I thought I was smarter than the wheel." You see, in the Jewish mindset, we don't try to beat the market. We respect the market's volatility as a fact of life. This is the concept of parnasa, sustenance that is purposeful. My father taught me that true wealth is not about the peak of the mountain, it's about the strength of the foundation. Benjamin built a skyscraper on a needle. My community builds wide, low-impact foundations that can support a palace for 100 years. The blueprint tells us that he who gathers little by little makes it grow. This is not just a moral lesson, it is a survival strategy. During that same crisis, while Benjamin was collapsing, my family firm was actually expanding. Why? Because we had our third at hand. We had liquidity. While others were forced to sell their assets for pennies to survive, we were in a position to buy. We didn't celebrate their loss, but we were ready because we followed the protocol of the 3/3. This is the first lesson I want you to etch into your mind. Never let your ambition outpace your architecture. If you want your wealth to survive a crisis, you must stop looking for the one big win and start building a diversified vessel that can weather any season. Benjamin looked for luck, we looked for the law.
I want you to lean in closely now, because what I am about to tell you is where most people, even the most hard-working, fail. They spend their lives chasing the rain, but they never stop to build the barrel. In my community, we have a word that changed my life, kli. In Hebrew, it means vessel. The sages teach us a profound truth. The blessing of the Almighty does not rest on an empty space, nor does it rest on a broken vessel. If you want to survive a crisis, you must understand that your bank account is merely a reflection of your spiritual and mental kli. I remember a time in my own life, years ago, when I was managing a large investment group. We were making money faster than we could count it. I felt invincible. But I began to notice a pattern. The more we made, the more accidents happened. A lawsuit here, a bad partnership there, a sudden equipment failure. It was as if the money was leaking. I went to see my rabbi, a man who lived in a tiny apartment filled with books, yet he was the wealthiest man I knew in spirit. I told him, "Rabbi, I am bringing in the harvest, but my barn is constantly on fire." He looked at me and asked a simple question. Is your vessel built for yourself, or is it built for the covenant? He took me to the Torah, to the book of Deuteronomy, where it says, "And ye shall remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you power to get wealth, that He may establish His covenant." You see, the Jewish mindset survives a crisis because we do not view ourselves as owners. We are stewards. If you believe you own your money, then when the market crashes, you are crashing. Your identity is tied to the numbers. But if you view yourself as a steward of a vessel meant to do good in the world, to support your family, to give tzedakah, charity, to build your community, then the vessel becomes resilient. The blueprint teaches us that a vessel built on greed is brittle. It cracks under the pressure of a recession. But a vessel built on berachah and purpose is flexible. During every economic crisis I have lived through, I noticed that those who continued to give, those who maintained their vessel of integrity, were the ones who found unexpected doors opening. This is the solution I found in the Torah for the leaking money. Integrity is the sealant of the vessel. When a crisis hits, the first thing people sacrifice is their values. They cut corners, they break promises, they lie to survive. In doing so, they shatter their own kli. They might save $1 today, but they lose the ability to hold a fortune tomorrow. My family survived the hardest times because we made a pact. No matter how low the market goes, our standards of honesty remain at the ceiling. We kept our vessels intact, and because our vessels were whole, when the rain of the recovery finally came, we were the only ones ready to catch it all, while our competitors were still trying to glue their broken lives together.
I want to pause here and tell you a story about a man I knew in the Diamond District, a man named Isaac. Isaac had a vessel that was technically perfect, but he lacked the one thing that secures a fortune during a storm: humility. You see, Isaac didn't just want to be wealthy, he wanted everyone to know he was wealthy. He bought the fastest cars, the loudest watches, and he spoke of his deals in every coffee shop from 47th Street to the Hamptons. My father used to watch him and shake his head. He would say, "Isaac is building a lighthouse in a land of pirates." In our community, we have a warning about the ayin hara, the evil eye. It isn't just a superstition, it is a psychological and spiritual reality. When you broadcast your success before it is fully rooted, you create a vacuum of resentment and competition that will eventually collapse your structure. Isaac's crisis didn't come from the market, it came from his own vanity. Because he projected an image of infinite wealth, his creditors became aggressive at the first sign of a downturn. His partners, feeling eclipsed by his ego, abandoned him when he needed loyalty. He had built his kli out of glass, and when the heat of the recession arrived, it shattered. I learned from Isaac that the blueprint requires you to eat the fruit, but hide the tree. In my own business, even when we were at our most prosperous, we maintained a posture of simplicity. This is the secret of tzniut, modesty. It acts as a shield. When a crisis hits, the man who is flashy is the first one the collectors go after. The man who is quiet, who keeps his kli humble, is often left alone to rebuild in peace. I remember sitting in my office during a particularly brutal year for the real estate market. I had to let go of a few secondary assets to stay liquid. Because I hadn't spent my years bragging or showing off, I was able to negotiate with my lenders as a partner, not as a target. They trusted my character more than my collateral.
This is a solution from the Torah that many modern entrepreneurs forget. A good name is more desirable than great riches. Proverbs 22, verse 1. In a crisis, your good name is your ultimate currency. If you have spent the good years building an ego, the bad years will tear you down. But if you have spent the good years building hesed, kindness, and a reputation for quiet integrity, the community will rally to sustain you. I have seen it happen 100 times. I have seen families who lost their liquid assets but were kept afloat by the very people they had helped in silence years before. This is the hidden layer of the blueprint. Your wealth survives because it is anchored in the hearts of others, not just in the numbers of a ledger. Do not be like Isaac. Do not build a lighthouse for pirates. Build a sanctuary of quiet strength, and the storm will pass over you without even knowing you were there.
If there is one thing I see today that worries me, it is the obsession with the now. Everyone is looking at the tick of the clock, the daily closing price, the instant notification. But my father never looked at a clock to measure his progress. He looked at a calendar that spanned 100 years. This is the third pillar of the blueprint, the shift from the moment to the generation. In the modern world, when a crisis hits, people panic because they think in cycles of 30 days, the next rent payment, the next quarterly report. But in the Jewish mindset, we think in cycles of 70 years. We are not playing a game of sprints, we are stewards of a marathon. This is the essence of limud, the learning and wisdom passed down that outlasts any currency. I recall a boardroom meeting during the 2008 collapse. I was sitting with a group of young, brilliant fund managers. They were distraught, crying that their careers were over because they had lost 40% of their value in a month. I sat there, the oldest man in the room, and I smiled. One of them snapped at me. "How can you be happy? We are losing everything." I told them, I am not losing everything, I am buying time. You see, for the man who follows the blueprint, a crisis is simply a sale on the future. Because my community has a tradition of generational wealth, we do not consume everything we produce. We live below our means so that our children can stand on our shoulders. We teach our children the value of $1 before they know how to spend it. We provide them with the kli, the education and the values, long before we provide them with the capital. I watched those young men exit the market at the bottom, locking in their losses because they couldn't see past the next Friday. I stayed. My community stayed. We looked at our assets and said, "Is this a good business? Yes. Will people need this in 10 years? Yes. Then we wait." This is the power of bitachon, an unshakable trust. Not a blind hope that things will get better, but a trust in the laws of the blueprint. Modern application is simple, yet so few have the chutzpah, the audacity to do it. You must decouple your emotions from your equity. When the world is screaming sell, the blueprint whispers observe. When the world is buying luxuries to show off, the blueprint whispers build the foundation. I have lived to see my grandchildren enter the businesses I started during the worst economic times of my life. Why? Because we didn't build from my comfort, we built for their legacy. If you want to survive a crisis, you must stop asking how this affects your weekend and start asking how it affects your grandchildren's inheritance, not just in money, but in character and resilience.
I have shared with you the stories of my life, the tears of those who ignored the blueprint, and the quiet strength of those who followed it. Now, as we sit together at the end of this journey, I want you to understand one last thing. A crisis is a fire, and like any fire, it can either consume you or it can refine you. The difference is determined by what you are made of. If you are made of the fleeting trends of the world, you will turn to ash. But if you are forged in the ancient wisdom, the fire will only make you purer, stronger, and more valuable. Do not fear the headlines. Do not fear the shifting winds of the economy. Instead, look inward. Is your vessel whole? Are you practicing the 3/3 to protect your foundation? Are you acting as a steward of your blessings, or are you trying to be an owner of sand? Remember, mazal is not something that happens to you. It is something you prepare for by being in the right place at the right time with the right limud, the right learning. My time is nearly spent, and soon I will pass all I have built to the next generation. My greatest wealth is not in the ledgers I showed you, but in the peace I feel, knowing that the blueprint is secure in their hands. I want that same peace for you. Stop chasing the noise and start building your legacy. Build it on integrity. Build it on generational thinking. Build it on the covenant. Before I go, I want to leave you with a blessing that has been spoken over my children and grandchildren for more years than I can count. May the Almighty bless you and keep you. May He make His face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May He lift up His countenance upon you and give you peace. Shalom. But remember, true shalom is not just the absence of a storm. It is the presence of a foundation that cannot be moved. Go now, build your vessel, honor the blueprint, and may your house always be full, not just with gold, but with the wisdom to keep it. Subscribe to this community of wisdom, and let us walk this path together. Until next time, be well.